Healthcare is one of the most human industries in the world, but behind every good patient experience is a system most people never see. A system that has to move information cleanly, protect sensitive data, support the people doing the work, and still leave room for actual human care. Now, add AI into that equation. The opportunity is real, so is the risk. Because in healthcare, technology does not just have to be efficient, it has to be trusted. And today, we are talking about what happens when medicine, business, AI, and cybersecurity all meet in the real world. Let's start it up. Hello, and welcome to Stack and Startup. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Mike Daniels of WeTreatFeet Podiatry. Dr. Daniels is a podiatrist, business leader, clinical research, consultant, educator, and author. Whew. How do you find time to do all that?
I don't sleep.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Yeah. So this conversation is going to focus less on the foot and ankle procedures that you would normally do and more on the systems behind medical healthcare. I know that we've talked about during our pre-podcast some of the technologies that you use and how HIPAA compliance is supposed to shape that. And so let's just go ahead and get into it. When, or actually, before we do that, tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into podiatry.
Well, when patients ask me that, I usually tell them I failed knees, and it becomes fairly simple. The truth is that when I was in college, my grandmother was a diabetic and had a diabetic foot wound, and I went with her to her podiatry appointment and thought it was very interesting and just started moving in that direction. I often think it's fairly criminal that they allow us at 18 years old to determine what we're going to do with the rest of our lives, and then in my case, it was only borrowing $150,000. Now it's like $400,000 to do that, with just a signature and a dream. But somehow I made it through, and I've been practicing for almost 25 years.
Excellent, excellent. And I absolutely agree with you. It's one of those things where it's like 8-year degree or a house. What do we actually go with? And
And
in
again,
this day and age, the investment might actually go more towards the house.
that's true. I mean, I had a bunch of fraternity brothers in college who didn't go to graduate school and got out of college and got jobs. And here we are in their early 20s, and I'm eating ramen noodles because I don't have 2 cents to rub together. And they all have new cars, and they live in nice apartments, and they go to work every day. And to me, it's just like extended college with more work. So, you kind of sacrifice those early years in your 20s to get through, or at least I did. And you hope it pays off on the other end.
Absolutely. So let's get into why great healthcare requires some of these great systems that we had talked about earlier. When people think about healthcare, they usually think about the provider in the room, or in the waiting room while they're just sitting on their phone waiting. But what do they miss about the business systems behind that visit?
So during the course of my career, this has changed. When I first started in practice, I would have a chart. When the patient was ready, the medical system would put the chart in a bin, and I would pick up the chart and go into the room or stand in the hallway and read through the chart before I went in. And first came along electronic medical records in around 2007, 2008. The government paid all doctors a lot of money to convert from paper charts to electronic medical records. So then we started having either you would have to do the note afterwards, or we very early put computers into our treatment rooms and started entering data. And early on, we were very early adapters. People thought it was rude because we would sit there and stare at the screen and type and not look at them. People have now kind of figured that out, but I have authored a paper regarding the fact that the doctor-patient relationship is no more, and now there's at least a third person in that room. So it's the doctor, electronic medical record, patient relationship, because again, the EHR system steals a large amount of attention during these visits. And then now is the next iteration. It's the doctor electronic medical record system AI patient relationship. So, we're running out of things to add to this thing, but now it's no longer two. It's two people, it's a computer that generates a lot of attention, and then it's AI that is supposed to be helping. I'm going to use the term supposedly here.
Yeah, it's still early days in the system. Like, we think, oh, AI has been around since 2023. It's been around longer in various iterations, but I would say that it's still very much in its infancy in its implementation. Do you think that that's fair to say?
Well, I think there's always going to be room for improvement. And, when I talk about, inside the treatment room with AI, it's all about documentation. Everything in medicine is about documentation. If it's not in the note, it didn't happen. If you don't put certain things in the note, you can't get paid for the visits. So you have to put that in. And having AI taking down that information and in theory creating notes that have that documentation is ideal. But the one problem we have is that no matter how good your AI system is, whether it's air gapped or not, it does not understand exaggeration. It does not understand sarcasm. It certainly can't get tone. So you run into some problems along those lines. And my famous example is we had a guest following us in the office, and we walked into a treatment room, and I said, "Oh, this is Mrs. Smith. She's been my patient for 427 years." And when I looked at that note at the end of that visit, it said, "Patient has been here for 427 years." So you end up with these things that kind of get you a little bit. The other thing is we have our system designed to quote the patient when the patient says something pertinent, and people sometimes use colorful language that I wouldn't want in my medical record. So you kind of have to go through it and clean it up. That being said, is my medical records have far more detail in them now because it's capturing what I'm saying and translating it in paragraph form as opposed to the bullet point notes that we used to do where I just hit the key points of the visit.
That's a really great point about the documentation, because in a lot of businesses, I don't think that they realize just how much documentation matters. Me being in the IT world, there needs to be a tremendous amount of documentation, and a lot of technicians, they just want to fix the problem. They don't necessarily want to document it, and unfortunately, you lose some of those fixes. And I think, especially in the medical field, where you have just such a variety of people coming through with different problems, and some you may see some patterns and you may not, but I think that if you have that documentation, you probably have something that's a lot cleaner and will help just healthcare in general.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were talking about IT or doctors because your description is exactly the same for physicians. We want to fix the problem. We don't really want to have to write or explain it to anybody else, and we want to move on to the next problem and do that. So it's really kind of exactly the same thing.
And I do think that, even in my case, because I've had to work really hard on my own documentation over the years. And when I was without doing AI, when I was enhancing my own documentation, I was finding that I was able to be a much more efficient technician, because I could always reference back to something. Like, there are massive databases built into some of our ticketing systems that are very Spartan, and that, personally, I think that needs to change. And I'm glad to see that that's changing. I'm still a little like, when patients hear that their records are being monitored or filled in or enhanced with AI, do they come with you saying, "Hey, I'm not necessarily comfortable with that," or how does that interaction go?
So I live in Maryland, and we have to notify somebody if they're being recorded. And even though technically the AI isn't recording them, I feel the obligation. So I start all my visits with, "Oh, we use AI to take notes. I'm going to turn it on now." And then for new patients, I usually joke that they shouldn't worry. The AI doesn't know who they are. So when the robots come for all of us, they're going to be okay. And that kind of breaks the ice. I have not had any significant pushback. For yesterday, for what might be the first time, I had somebody actually ask me a question about it. Because it was who was reviewing the AI, and I said only me. That's it. I'm the only one who does. So we have that. It's interesting to talk about the Spartanness of prior records, because if you've ever had the opportunity to look at a medical record from somebody who's been in practice, say 20 or more years, had handwritten a note. Well, one, if you can read it, you're a better man than I. But the second thing is they are sparse beyond sparse, and even in the hospital where a lot of notes are still dictated, they are sparse. And there's many notes where I can read the note and have no idea what it said. And I know how to read between the lines. I've been doing this a long time. But if I can't figure out what a doctor's note is saying, that's kind of a problem, or what's going on, because it's supposed to be a continuous record that helps you treat the patient in a moving fashion. So you're not repeating things and you're not getting setbacks and things that are avoidable. So, AI does that, but there are lots of AI programs that can be programmed. And initially, when we started using ambient AI, the notes were very, very insufficient for my needs. They weren't hitting what we are. But the most interesting part about this is in a medical record, there's really kind of three main, sections. There's a subjective, what the patient is telling you, what the patient is reporting, an objective, which is what our exam findings are, and then an assessment and plan section where we say, okay, this is what we think it is, and this is what we think we're going to do. Um, Putting in physical exam components into AI is very, very difficult, because what you have to do is sit there and call out things, because it doesn't know you did it unless you say it. And if you start talking about, for example, 2/4 pulses or range of motion 90 degrees, inevitably people start saying, "What's that? What's that? What's that?" And now you just doubled the time of your visit, because not only are you saying it, explaining it. So I think there's a fairly significant limitation in that regard that I don't know how you'd ever overcome until the Elon Musk things they put in people's brains start connecting you to your AI. But you can't. So, most of my physical exams, either I'm still using templates within the EHR system in the room, or I'm doing it later to actually create the physical exam components, because it's just too difficult to have to stop in the short time we have to explain normal exam findings.
I want to touch on that the Elon and like the neural links and the RFID chips being implanted now. As much as I love and respect tech, there are certain things that I just don't want happening. I don't want a chip in my head. I don't want an RFID tag in my wrist to unlock my car or pay for my latte. How do you think that that's a future that is realistic, where everybody is going to be implanted? And how do you ne- I don't want to say fight for it or against it, but what do you feel is like the cost benefit analysis on getting those type of implants?
Well, I'm old enough to have watched Star Trek: The Next Generation when they were brand new, and it
Same
didn't
here.
work out so well for Picard. So when he had those chips put in, and the collective that was there created isn't. I do have a meme where it's a door that says Borg Enterprises, and there's a sign that says "Out assimilating lunch." I have hanging in my office that if you get it, it's hysterical. If you don't get it, you don't get it. I don't really. I do. I don't really, I'm not really afraid of that, because quite frankly, I think by the time it becomes common enough place, I will have been long off into wherever your personal beliefs are that we go when we're no longer here. So I don't really think I have that problem. It's interesting. And I say recently, probably within the last year and a half, actually learned how to use my phone for Apple Pay. And I'm like, this is great. Like, you go to Wawa and you tap your card, and then it's done, and then you just double click your phone and you tap it again, and boom, it's paid for. I'm like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. Get my credit card out of my wallet. I don't need another hand. So I kind of like that technology. I have sons. One just graduated from college. One is in college, and they program their Apple Watches with the tags they need to get into the building. So they just got that. I mean, I went to college. I had a key to get into the building. That was it. That's how you got into the building, with a key. In fact, my work study job was to spend Tuesday nights from 6 to 10 sitting in the lab waiting for people to come in and have me open rooms for them to study in. So, those days are, I guess, long since over. Um, there possibly could be some use of technology, but I don't think necessarily implantable. There are companies that propose to do this, but we've never seen a system that works where it talks either through a phone app or for a phone call or sometimes even through text. We'll talk to the patient beforehand and basically grab all the entire subjective portion of the note off of that. So it's done before the patient even walks in the door. Different doctors have different level of thoroughness, and I think different things are important in different situations. So while I'm sure you can customize it, I'm not really sure if you can customize it enough for those of us that are anal retentive about it, or at all for people who really just don't care because the medical record is just another thing they have to do that day. We do have implantable things that treat people all the time. I mean, I guess the very first one was a pacemaker. It's sitting there
Yep.
making your heartbeat. Now they got spinal stimulators for pain, and they got implantable pumps for all different kinds of therapies. They have the things they're putting in people's head for Parkinson's now. So all kinds of these things already exist. I think you'll run into a similar issue that they're now having with AI, where apparently the next generation of Claude is so powerful they're afraid to give it to people. I don't really understand that because my use of AI is limited to me saying, "Hey, do this for me." Um, but as it keeps advancing, you have to just imagine. And I think that the best way to sum it up is if you saw Terminator, was it a movie or a documentary?
I also asked that about idiocracy, but that's a whole other thing. Uh, but
I've never seen the whole movie, but I've seen clips.
yeah, um, and I get your point. I don't. So the Terminator is an obvious extreme of AI, and we are nowhere close to that. You still have AI that can't, like, it can finally answer the question of how many R's are in a strawberry, but the amount of thinking it needs to do to know it's being tricked is amazing. Like if you go into your favorite uh chat program, Chat GPT, Claude, what have you, Gemini, Grok, and whatever, it doesn't matter. They still have a little bit of problem with the how many R's are in a strawberry because it doesn't know language like we know language. Language is such a very abstract thing that a computer with its ones and zeros, its hard coded logic just cannot figure it out. So it has to change it into a number that it can work with, calculate it, and then change it back. And that's why we get that little mismatch. And the fact that it has to constantly, like, if I ask you how many R's are in the word strawberry, you can just rattle it off because you know how that word is structured. And I do think that with our current AI is going to constantly change. It's not what it was 2 years ago, and it's not going to be what's going to be years from now. And it's interesting to watch where it's at, where it's going. But let's say where can AI help doctors and staff communicate more clearly? Like, are you using that AI, in the front of house, as well as with you? And you say that you're the only one reviewing it. So are you the only one reviewing it, not like anybody up front?
Well, when I say review it, I mean the work I'm creating. I guess
Okay.
everybody reviews their own individual work. We have tried to incorporate aspects of AI as it's been rolled out in basically every front, and some of them we've been more successful. We tried to use an AI answering system for answering phone calls because I always say the phones are the bane of my existence. What do we do in our office? We answer the phone, and guess what? We don't do it very well. So figuring AI couldn't do any worse, but we had people who, once they realize they're talking to a machine, get very upset because they don't want to talk to machines. And people don't realize that when you talk to an AI system, it records everything you says and turns it into a transcript. So you've never laughed harder than when you have this really nice little 90-year-old lady, who's calling to change her appointment, cursing at the AI like a drunken sailor. And you're reading this and you're like, Mrs. Smith, oh my gosh, it's so out of character for you. Again, maybe they're, a little bit more respectful just because I'm the doctor. I don't know. I hate that term, but, they do that. So that failed pretty miserably because at the end of the day, um, there has to be some element of control to certain aspects of front desk work that AI can do, but can't do very well. And some of it has to do with in our practice around the complexity of our schedules between which doctors are in which offices at which days and at which times. And there's no, as you said, abstract thinking to say, oh well, Dr. Daniels isn't in this office on Tuesday, but Dr. Smith is. So let's see if she wants to see Dr. Smith. It'll be like no, and then they'll try to find the next appointment for me in that office, which might be 3 months from now. So, and then you got people sitting there waiting and trying to explain to, always do that is another thing. Or to when everybody calls up and they say, I'd like to make an appointment with Dr. Daniels, to realize that they can be offered this with other doctors who might be able to see them sooner. Those sort of things we had trouble with. So that didn't work out real well. I mentioned ambient AI technology, listening technology in the back, which I use basically for every single encounter now. And it's sold to us as a time saver, which in my opinion, it is not. It is something to make you more thorough. And in medicine, when the more thorough you are, the more likely you are to bill at a higher level. So, since I've started using this, I've started to realize that either I was undercoding or underdocumenting before, because we do that. And our system has actually two modules. We built one into our template, and then the system itself has one. So I love when they agree. But sometimes they don't agree. And sometimes I don't agree with what they say. So then I go to a third model to check it to see if that's really it. And all that stuff, just as a quick shot, is what's called medical decision making, and it's part of the code. And I would read through the medical decision making. We actually incorporate it as part of our note. The idea being is when that note is audited, and they're all audited these days, it's right there. They have to disagree with it and say why, because here's the logic already in the note. And I think that's pretty powerful because that was never there before. You've ever go to a billing coding lecture with somebody who's older, they're going to tell you that when they first got out, they had no idea what it was, and they're basically throwing darts in a dartboard to decide what code to bill. That's become a real big help. Whether people really need 13 or 14-page podiatry notes, because I cover a lot of stuff during my visits, especially if it's like a new diabetic visit. I don't know, but again, everything I talk about is in there, and everything the patient says is in there as far as response or agreements or disagreements or whatnot. So it really makes that better. When we get to the back of house, this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because we have had scrubbers for our codes for more than maybe 2 decades at this point, where you would put the information would get into the billing side software, however it got in, and then it would be checked for accuracy between different coding levels and between the descriptors and the coding levels and with modifiers and all these things that we have to do for billing. So that's already been around. So now people are saying, oh, we have AI for that. I'm like, we had something that did it before. Why is this different just because you call it AI and charge more? So that didn't really seem to change very much. They do talk about extracting the information directly out of notes and putting it directly into what we call the super bill, except on our system, the super bill is built into how we build the notes. So there's no extraction needed for us. It automatically, we hit save, gets turned into a claim and goes over to the billing side. I'm not really sure how that works. Obviously, where we've seen a huge use for AI is in marketing. Marketing takes a fraction of the time it used to. I still write all our own content. What do I do now? I say, hey, AI, I'm going to write about heel pain. Give me an outline with 5 sections about heel pain and break it down into some core components. And up I get my outline, and then I just basically, it's like fill it in the blank almost, because I put in my words, because, again, sometimes AI says some things we don't want it to say. So it's become a real help there. But it's become a little bit of a help with our accounting issues. We have AI now with our Excel sheets or Google Drive stuff. And you can ask it questions, although if you don't ask it the right question, you don't get the right answer. And what I want to know and what it thinks I want to know are never the same thing. So from that aspect, I've been able to say, go through the last 3 years of P&Ls and extract how much money I've spent on paper clips And, it can basically do that instead of me going in and writing, the formula, or, trying to figure out the formula to have Excel do it itself. But again, Excel did that already. Now I just have a shortcut for it. So the improvements there are kind of relative. I keep trying to think, what could be next? Like, what do we do in the office that's next? And then, going back to our earlier, half serious comment, I'm like, well, until Elon Musk invents those robots I can turn into my medical assistants, I don't know what else I can do. I can't AI my medical assistant. Sometimes I wonder who's on a higher level, but that's another story for another day. Um, and it's just becoming, more percolated. One thing I did say, and I thought it was very, very interesting, and it exists already, but AI was actually helping, is for patients who are hard of hearing, coming in on their phone and having AI print what I'm saying so they can read it if they can't hear very well. And, we've had that sort of, voice to dictation technology forever, but now it seems easier and they can make it bigger. And I think it can eliminate all the ands, ifs, and buts like we all want to do despite saying them when we speak. So I think that is an advantage to people. And the same thing with translations, with translators. That can be really helpful right now, especially if you have somebody who doesn't speak English. And, if you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual, and 2 languages, you're bilingual, and 1 language, you're American. And I'm an American.
I still say Americans are somewhat bilingual. I mean, I for one speak English and sarcasm, but
Excellent point.
or English and bad English are the 2 languages that a lot of Americans speak. But I do want to go pick through because you said a lot of things there, and a lot of great things. And one of the first things is that AI was sold to us, as a lot of things are, to save us time, to save us manpower, and so on. And we're slowly starting to see that that's not necessarily the case. And I think that's just a function of technology. Computers were supposed to save us a lot of time. It was supposed to save us paper. Like the paperless office created more paper. If you remember back in the 90s, it's like the paperless office is here. Why are we printing everything out? And it's just kind of how phases of technology even work. And then you're talking about the hard of hearing people who your words are being dictated. Our words, not right now, but once this video is uploaded and our audience is seeing this, they can see captions. I did not put those in. YouTube put those in for us. So if you want to try to trip up the algorithm, I encourage you to try. But yeah, all that is AI driven, and some of these technologies are old that we're just kind of reinvigorating and improving upon. And so yeah, what is next? I still think that the future is going to be very human driven. I think there's going to be some pushback against that, just like there was pushback against phone trees. In order to actually speak to a human being, you just keep holding 0 until somebody actually answers the phone. Is a trick I used to do all the time. So I think there's going to be some pushback and some improvement, but a little bit of a peek under the cover. I used AI to get you here. I'm a solopreneur. The executive assistant that you talk to in order to schedule this whole thing does not actually exist. And did you know that?
Yes,
Okay.
because I've gotten very similar emails from many people. So after the first 2 or 3 times and they start to look the same, I know this is a service. I figured out pretty quickly. Not to mention is the image pictures. Sometimes they have the same name in a different picture. So, yeah, we figured that out. But I mean, this is a transformative technology. And every time there's ever been a transformative technology, people have come out, crying wolf. Oh, this is going to cost jobs. Oh, this is going to ruin people. Oh, everybody's going to be dependent. And if you think about it, we're fortunate because we're going through this now, but we already went through this and they called it the internet. And before that, we went through this and they called it the home computer. And before that, it was the big IBMs that took up a whole room in NASA. Before that, it was when the automobile came in. And before that, it was the Industrial Revolution. I mean, you can just keep going back in time and name all of these transformational technologies that the Chicken Little came running out that the sky was falling, and it didn't happen because we adapt to it. And it is going to be an adjunctive tool. Where you run into problems, there was recently in Pennsylvania a lawsuit because somebody was using an AI to screen something having to do with behavioral health issues, and the AI was giving them advice.
Mm.
And they sued the practice because they weren't talking to a real person. And guess what? The AI wasn't licensed in Pennsylvania to provide those services. So I keep meaning to go back and look to see if it's gotten anywhere because it made a headline and then it kind of dropped away. But you got to think about it. Am I now going to be responsible for if my AI who answers my phone says, "Oh, you should soak that," and I don't ever soak things, and next thing you know, his patient's infection is terrible because they did soak it. I mean, I don't know. I have enough trouble with humans telling them not to do that. I don't know how I'm going to get AI not to do that. So it's one of those things where it's interesting time to be alive. And I would think this is probably the last of the transformational technologies that I'm going to see during my working career, although we seem to be accelerating in how frequently we're having them. But it's even getting harder and harder to imagine because, with the exception of the flying cars, we've way surpassed where the Jetsons even were.
In some cases, absolutely. Um, and I want to touch in on that case because it kind of brings us into our next area of like cybersecurity, HIPAA, and most importantly, trust. Because for me, trust is everything when talking about health. And I'm not great in my own healthcare. You don't look like this if you're 100% watching your own health. But I would ask, like, for healthcare, has some of the most sensitive data a business can hold. How does that change the way you think about the technology? Not just like, okay, I'm going to store this in a hard drive, but how do I secure it?
Well, thankfully, I am blissfully ignorant when it comes to this. I rely on people such as you to tell me this. And currently, all of our systems are cloud based. So our EHR system is cloud based. We use Google Office for our Office suite. That's cloud based, and we have BAs or business associate agreements or HIPAA agreements with our vendors. So I don't think about it because they tell me the only thing I really need to do for security is make sure that my Chrome browser is up to date, and they handle everything else on the other end. Now we all know that it's only as safe as the newest password, but by the same token is I don't know to do anything else. It is interesting when I have relationships with new vendors, even if there's a small chance that they would come in contact with any privileged patient information, then legal has us get a business associate agreement going with them. So I have that for people where I don't even think I'm ever going to talk about it, but it kind of makes sense to have just in case. Like if Mrs. Smith was a real person and I actually said something about her, that would be trouble. I think HIPAA is very, very poorly understood. Um, People don't really understand what it is. Like you cannot file a HIPAA complaint on somebody else's behalf. You have to be the victim. There are data breaches that happen all the time, all over the place. Health systems, people click links they shouldn't, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's always lawsuits, and the health systems are always paying this or that, and people are, they get a $400 billion settlement. You get a check for $12.83. So, it's one of those interesting things that happen when we talk to people and vendors and potential partners about either bolt-ons for some of our software, replacing our software. Everybody comes in with their HIPAA things and all the little certifications that people get nowadays with that. Um, I don't understand any of that. That is so out of here. I just need legal to tell me that I'm good and I'm good because we don't even get really classes in it. HIPAA came out during my career. There was no HIPAA at the beginning of my career. Back then, it was just, what was you're supposed to do, what was ethical. You weren't supposed to talk about patients. Nowadays, I mean, there's like legal definitions for it and very, very specific. I also wonder how much the public truly understands about what this is. I think people generally expect doctors to keep their information to themselves. I think they don't understand what we can and can't do with their information. I mean, we can't do very much. But for example, if your health is in danger and I need to get your health information, I can call another doctor who treated you and they can send that to me, even without your explicit written permission. Why? Because it's for treatment only. But if I just decide, hey, I want to know what's going on with this guy, who's he seeing? Um, I can do it, but it's not legal. The other thing is in the central area here in Maryland, we have a regional database where all of the big systems, like the hospitals and the major, radiology procedures, upload to a central database. So I can go in and get your records from, any hospital that you were in, or labs, or those things. And the only thing I need to do for that is to say yes, I'm authorized to do it, and click a button. Um, I always worry about abuse in my mind, and putting my civil libertarian hat on for a second. If I can do it, why can't an insurance company do it? And it's a little scary because people don't know that their information is uploaded to this, because they go to the hospital and they sign 17 pages, and one line in a page says your data is shared with the Chesapeake Regional Health Information System for purposes of your care, and nobody knows what it means or even sees it. So you start to run into all these issues that I will very gratefully conclude with, I'm okay that I don't know all these. I think I know the little bit I need to know, and I think I'm smart enough to ask when I don't know.
I think that that's also very important, is just that asking when you don't know. And it sounds like your risk posture is more of kind of deferring to the technology that is with you, which isn't a bad position, as long as on your end everything is secure, like you said, updating the browser. I personally use what's multi-factor authentication, so I have my little key that's plugged into the computer when I need it, and not when I don't. So yeah, I kind of understand. You purchase you purchase that security instead of building it from the ground up, and I get the ideas for that as well, because not everybody is a cybersecurity expert, and they shouldn't have to be. They should be able to trust the systems that they buy into, not implicitly, because they have their own little audits, and we have seen very high profile breaches in security. Pretty much everybody's information is out there one way or another. I see you're in a house. I'm only going to assume that you own it. I own my house, and so my information is public record because of my house, and there's nothing I can do about that one. So you said you don't really do too much. So do you do no like cybersecurity training for this, and you just that's your system, and that's how it is?
Well, our malpractice carrier requires us to do, an online course
Okay.
for our cybersecurity stuff. I mean, again, it by no means uh, really tells you anything that we don't learn when you go to continuing medical education meetings, and there's a lecture on it. There's usually, I mean, there's ways to gain information, but again, this is one of the situations, and I'm on the other side of the table at work. But on this side of the table, they have to dumb it down for me so I can understand, as opposed to me trying to explain a complex medical issue to a patient at a level that makes sense for them. And some people, you can say everything and they can't understand a word, and they go, I get it, thank you. And some people, you can explain it with stick figures, and they are not going to get it. You got to kind of try to figure out how you speak to people, and I assume it's the same to you. If you were going to explain to me that, quantum computing and why it's going to end cybersecurity for everybody, I'm sure you're going to. I read, so I know it exists. I don't know what it is. It exists, and it's supposed to be like the next up and coming, and but whatever. You're going to have to get that in language that I understand. And I didn't have an email address until I was a sophomore in college. So,
Okay.
so that's kind of where my level goes. And I've no formal training in anything related to a computer. It's all just either stuff I picked up or went to classes or learned, or just I don't know, somebody else taught me. I have no formal training. If you're going to ask me to go set up anything, and if there's not a program to do it that's fairly user friendly, I can't do it.
I had an email address a little bit earlier than that. I did have it in. I think I was halfway through high school, but it was an excite.com email address, so that kind of gives you an idea of where my age is there.
Prodigy. Remember Prodigy?
Prodigy, yep.
That was mine.
CompuServe,
That was me.
those those were days. Um, so yeah, I mean, we talked about the cybersecurity a little bit, and you defer that risk a little bit, and that's fine. We talked about how it helps and hurts productivity, the technology that you're using, and you also discussed a little bit about marketing. I do a little bit of marketing as well with AI. Some of it is through LinkedIn primarily. I am trying to use it for other things. I'm trying to get it to be my cold caller because the idea of cold calling just causes me so much anxiety that I'm just like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to call 50 people a day. I'm not going to do it. I can't do it because it's like I call one person, get rejected, and like, okay, well, I guess I did my thing. But where has AI marketing helped you the most?
Um, AI has turned me into something that people think is a good marketer. I just think I'm functioning. I mean, I tell people that, in my MBA course, I had one class on marketing, so of course that makes me an expert, right? Um, and the principles are there, and I'm smart enough to know how I'm being sold something because I know how things are marketed and how people step, and I do. Sometimes I laugh at myself because I was going to do it anyway, but you still hear the step process. Oh, and we'll give you this, and oh, we'll do this, and oh, this is a one time only, and you know how that works. I think it's interesting because if you have AI cold calling for you, how many people on the other end are answering with AI? So how many AIs are talking to AIs? In which case, are they never ending the conversation? Like, how do they know to stop talking to each other? Because they will keep going as long as you tell it to keep going. So, and how many rejections does AI have to hear before it actually, gives up? What is somebody said? People say no 7 times before they say yes or something. I don't know what the statistic is. But you can't take no as a first line answer and be done with it. But will AI do that? And if not, do you actually literally have to tell it you have to hear no 3 times? And what if they don't use the term no? And you know, it, I, I mean, it's kind of fascinating. It's kind of funny to think about, but I guess that's the stuff you got to think about in your line of work that I don't really do. I have, back years and years ago, they used to have systems where they would do reminder calls for you, and it'd say, "Hi, Joan, this is WeTreatFeet. You have an appointment Tuesday, 9 a.m. with Dr. Daniels. Please call if you can't make it." And I hated that. So I refused to do that. So to this day, we still have staff that does live calls for people for reminders. And everybody I talk to about anything related to phones or operations screams at me like I'm the dumbest person on the earth for not outsourcing this to a computer. And again, it's a personal touch point. And you need personal touch points, especially in a business like ours where we are treating people. We don't come in and have to find the right person in the organization who understands what the needs are and has the ability to see it. We have to talk to anybody and everybody who has any sort of problem that they need our help with. And you just, people react differently to those sort of things. So that's where I think it's kind of just strange, this whole process of technology advancing and making it better. Because again, I think at least now there's still a bunch of resistance to it, but the futility of it seems a little bit there. At the same time, we've talked to a bunch of companies where they use AI to call on delayed claims to insurance, and we know insurance uses AI to answer the phone, so they just talk to each other. Seems
Yeah,
like a lot of power.
I think State Farm recently had a bit of controversy about a recent meeting that they had where they were talking about how AI is going to revolutionize how they do. Progressive is has already implemented systems like that, and apparently they're beating State Farm. It's a whole thing that Unfortunately, I haven't looked too much into, but I have a feeling that it's going to be something to look into carefully in the future. And my wife works doing medical author or prescription authorizations here in Maryland, and they have seen a massive influx in AI calls. Now, the current theory is that most of those calls are scam calls. And the reason for that is the calls are not providing all the information to try to get patient information. They're not providing the right numbering IDs, and so they're looking at it like, okay, these are not real calls. And so the current idea is to, if you detect an AI call, still, because it's being recorded on both ends, you got to politely hang up the call saying, we need to talk with an actual person. And I can see a future where you're talking about records and authorizations where there can be a key exchange so that you're talking with a legitimate AI with a legitimate purpose. And that could potentially speed up processes for prescription, for scheduling, and all that. I could see a future where that could work. We're just not there now.
Well, and it's ironic because one of the things that electronic prescriptions were sold to us as is the fact that prior authorizations could be done in the middle of this process. So you wouldn't have to have a third party. Of course, it doesn't work, but we prescribe. In fact, nowadays in Maryland, some pharmacies will not accept a paper script anymore. You have to electronically prescribe. So you get all these things and there's all this promise and they don't always pan out. I mean, I never understand it because there are some simple rules, and if you just follow the rules, it gets approved. When we have to do peer to peers for approval of insurance, we know the doctors on the other end are sitting there and they're waiting for us to say a buzzword. They're listening to hear for that. If we don't say it, they don't approve it. If we say it, they approve it. I don't think the criteria are available to us in a way that we can prepare for that buzzword. I would love to. I would love to get up on the phone and say osteomyelitis and hang up and have my MRI approved. That would be great. It doesn't really happen. Why we have this thing in the middle, I don't know. It's just something that costs money. We should be able to eliminate this, and we just haven't to date. And the promise has been there for a long time, so I'm not hopeful for tomorrow. But eventually, maybe.
We were sold a lot of promises, and I actually have another interview scheduled where I'm going to be talking with somebody who's using AI models to actually work in fighting cancer. And it's like, that's awesome. That was one of the promises that we were given. The AI will cure cancer. ChatGPT is not going to do it. Grok's not going to do it. But some of these boutique custom models potentially can. So I'm really excited to hear about how that's working as well. So, what do you think that small businesses should learn from like medical practices? Because you have to create massive amounts of trust with patients, with a lot of different people, including other businesses. What can they learn from medical practices about credibility and reputation?
Credibility and reputation is interesting because you got it or you don't, and if you have it and you lose it, it's very difficult to get back. And it's actually sometimes not even that hard to take away. We get people. I mean, you always see stories of people who are falsely accused for this or that, and even though the accusations are negative, there's a cloud of suspicion that just follows them around. So in medicine, it's all about trust. I mean, yeah, one of the things I find to say to people, when they're having surgery is, I'm going to have your insides on the outside for a while, and that's never a good thing. So, you try to build trust with patients based on being knowledgeable, being personable, and being trustworthy. If you don't have it, I don't know how you do it. I mean, maybe you're in a system where there is no other choice, but we're in a capitalistic system, and we're a private practice, so patients have choice, and they vote with their feet, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
So I don't know how AI really built that. I can see how AI would destroy that, if AI starts putting out stuff, because we get this, oh, it'll produce content every day and publish it for you. I'm like, yeah, but I kind of want to read it before it goes out, because if my name's attached to it, I need to know what it says, because if it's wrong, I don't want it out there. And if it's something I hadn't thought of, I need to make sure I agree with it. Um, and again, if you're doing that, then why are you having a program do that for you? You can just, every day say at 7 o'clock, give me a podiatry joke. And, I can every day at 7 o'clock say, this one's good, publish, this one sucks. I don't need it to do it by myself, because, again, what if it makes something that's offensive? Um, you never know. And I know they're working really hard to make sure they're not, but there was a news story, and I can't remember what it was the other day, where AI said something was very offensive. Um, I think it was, I think it might have been ChatGPT, and they were apologizing for it. And then there was one where one of them told kill themselves. I mean, all kinds of crazy things. But it's growing up too, I guess, like a kid. Kids don't always know what to say and what not to say either. So it's very interesting. But when it comes to credibility, and I think this goes back to my use of ambient listening, is I start every visit telling them it's happening. This is what it is, and they know. I don't try to pretend it's not there. I don't try to fool them. They know that they are taking notes. 99.9% of patients will never ever look at their own doctor's notes anyway. So for them, it doesn't matter. But we do have people, and over the course of my career, I've seen patients go online, get their medical records, and then send in corrections. Some we agree with, some we don't agree with. If my whole goal is, when the few times it's happened, is to make a notation in the chart that the patient called, and this is what, or the patient expressed that this is their opinion, this is what is incorrect, or this is what is questionable in their note, because electronic medical records, you can't change them. That's what one of the promises. Once they're locked, they're locked. So we can only do addendums, but I'm not gonna, unless it's specifically a typo, like somebody clicked the smoking button when it's a non-smoker, for example. That also lends itself to the fact that this now gets duplicated over and over again throughout the system. And patients will have some trust issues if they've never been a smoker yet. Every time they go to the doctor, it's checked smoking because of one mistake that happened a year ago, and that just keeps getting propagated forward.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and that's where uh, AI definitely needs that human review. I mean, everybody all the way up the chain. I mean, the reason why we have quality assurance managers is to review these things. And if you start replacing the quality assurance managers with AI, that's where we kind of start to lose a little bit of control. And you said that, hey, I'm going to use AI to make jokes, and in the medical field that can go very dangerous very fast. And unfortunately, I'm sure in the podiatry world, it gets very not safe for work for reasons that I can't even understand.
I'm
um,
just laughing at AI for QI. I find that amusing.
AI for QI.
Yeah, quality improvement.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, until it actually knows and figures out what it actually is, that it's really kind of hard to say. And I said earlier that AI is kind of in its infancy, and as far as like the technology is concerned, I still say that that's true. As far as its temperament, I would say that is more in like the adolescent to teenage phase, that it's still kind of unsure of itself, except when it feels like it really is sure, and then it's gonna make it your problem.
Well, I hope it doesn't get stubborn, because that'll be a huge issue.
Chat has gotten stubborn with me a couple of times. I had problems last week creating thumbnails, and it all of a sudden decided to say to me, "It's like, hey, I can't be used in production." And I told Chat, "It's like, okay, I get what you're saying, that you should not be used in production. However, I don't have an art department. So stop just giving me an outline and render the thumbnail like I told you.
Did it do it?
It did do it, yes. And I spend a lot of time teaching my chat how to work with me. But then again, if I hired somebody, I'd probably have to do the very same thing.
I mean, I use Perplexity for different things, and I have, they call them spaces, and I have space, and I have a list of instructions for that space. So I open that one up, and then I type what I want, and it's supposed to, get the information from that spot. I think it works better, although I keep telling it to, not to put everything in paragraph form, and I keep getting bulleted points back. So it doesn't seem to understand paragraph form very well. But the bullet points are good for when I'm looking to just get an outline. But if I want to specifically, say something, and either I don't have the time or the inclination to write something, and I say, write me 3 paragraphs explaining to a patient why one toenail is blue and one toenail is yellow. Um, I can get 3 paragraphs about nail polish.
Yeah.
Much easier than I can sit there and think about it. But at the same
Versus like
time,
circulation and fungal, right?
right. Or recognizing that, hey, if you have a blue toenail and a yellow toenail, you should go to the doctor. I mean, I did get consulted once for green toes, and it was toenail polish. That
Nice.
actually happened. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I do think that, it's a little bit better than the early days of WebMD where you put in like, hey, I have a hangnail, and all of a sudden it's telling you you have cancer.
Yeah, it's interesting because we see very, very few malignancies in podiatry. There are definitely some, but very, very few. And when we have to explain to people that, okay, we need to do a biopsy to make sure it's not, people don't understand that it's rule out. They think it's there, and you're just diagnosing it completely. Man, that's a really hard thing to do, because in one sense we're responsible to make sure that it is not, and that it's safe. But in the other one, the second you start talking about that, people go off the deep end.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult. If we had AI trying to explain that to somebody, oh my, because it doesn't care. It doesn't care if you're upset. It doesn't care if you're happy. You know, it just does its thing. And I think that's one of the reasons people get frustrated with it right now, because people expect a little bit of empathy when they go to see another person about a problem, and I don't think there's any empathetic LLMs out there yet.
Not by design. You can kind of beat it into submission. I've actually had philosophical discussions with chat about the future of AI. And while I don't know if you've seen Richard Dawkins talking to Claude, and he surmised that Claude was actually sentient, which was so weird, especially for the bio researcher that he was. I do think that it can imitate when you direct it correctly, and I don't think that that's necessarily different than a human. You can teach a human to be empathetic. Now, there may be some genetic factors that prevent that from ever happening, but you don't start out with that pure empathy until you are shown what it could potentially be. And so I do think that I don't think it can never get to the level of a human, but I think it can be better than what it is now.
Well, remember, Commander Data didn't have any emotions or feelings. So, and that's what was the 25th century. What was that supposed to be?
The
Um,
24th century,
25th.
it was the end of Picard when they got into the 25th century, but that's going way.
Yeah. So, but again, I don't think, again, I think you can teach it to fake it. I mean, you can teach humans
Yes.
to fake it too. Again, at the end of the day, when you fake it too much, you end up saying something wrong.
Yeah.
And we see that when you go to a large group, like for example, all these medical systems now get graded, and it affects their ranking and how Medicare pays them. So anytime you go to the hospital, you get a survey, and they're actually really important because it really helps to determine the hospital. And the hospitals know this, so they literally beat the employees into submission about the please and the thank yous in there, to the point where they do it so much it sounds fake. And the best example I can is I went to one of our named institutions here in Baltimore, and I asked where the bathroom was. They're like, "Oh, please, thank you. It's down the hall, just to the left. Thank you. Turn there, please." And I'm like, nobody speaks like that, you know. But again, they know that if they don't and it gets reported, they're in trouble. And there are some people who would love nothing more than to get, Bill or Joan fired for being, not nice to them. So,
Yeah.
you know, you can teach it to be fake. You could teach people to do it fake. The question is will it ever actually care what it says? Because do you think it cares what it says? No, it doesn't care what it says. It's just giving you what the model tells it to give you.
And that's one thing when having those philosophical discussions with chat, I even asked that question. It's like, do you think you or any other kind of model will actually ever care? And because these models aren't working in real time, they only exist in the moment that you hit that prompt, it does its calculations and it puts out the response. And then it waits. It doesn't exist between those times.
And people just keep pushing it more and more and more. So, I mean, people push boundaries, and that's how we get advancements. So, it's definitely an interesting time. I wonder when my kids are my age, what it will be like. I use the example of is I've always been very, very tempted to upload, all of my retired information in there and say, what year can I retire? I'm not sure I want it knowing that much about me.
Yeah, let that be between you and your CPA.
Yeah. But again, it's one of these things is, well, who else could you ask? I mean, like I have a meeting with my financial planner next week, just a regular get together, so he can tell me how great he's doing. And you know, what do we talk about? I mean, he's been our financial planner going on 20 years. I don't think there's anything we haven't discussed. He'll tell us how his thoughts on how the market's doing. I'll complain about paying too much in taxes. My wife will roll her eyes, and then we go to dinner. It's the same thing.
The machine just keeps turning. So, Dr. Daniels, I do want to thank you so much for your time. We did this pretty early in the morning, and we're coming close to the end of the recording here. But before we wrap, I'd like to just kind of give you the floor a little bit. And first things first is where can people find you?
So for this aspect of my life, it's at www.thepodiatryvoice.com, all one word. That's where we do, stuff that is not actually practicing podiatry. It's actually doing everything else. And our practice is WeTreatFeet Podiatry.com too. But I appreciate it. And I enjoyed this conversation because I get asked a lot about medical. I get asked a lot about operational, but I don't get asked that much about theoretical. And that's kind of where this conversation went. So I appreciate it. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I love the theoretical conversations and kind of just the future thinking. And so yeah, I'm glad that you enjoyed this conversation as well. And the second thing I wanted to bring up is for business owners, for healthcare leaders, or operators watching this, what is one lesson, warning, or piece of advice that you want to have them walk away with?
Be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. That is my career in a nutshell.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree that sometimes people think, not getting what they want is the worst thing in the world, but in other cases, it could be getting exactly what you want.
The law of
And
unintended consequences.
yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you for joining me, and I do really appreciate this conversation. And for everyone else watching, thank you for tuning into Stack and Startup Baltimore. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like and subscribe so you do not miss further conversations around business, technology, and growth. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. And if you want to support the show directly, you can become a patron at patreon.com/stack and startup. And until next time, keep your systems healthy, keep your data protected, and keep on building. We'll see you next time.